Yeah, I mean, it's a little trickier than just giving you a soundbite. I do so many different kinds of things that it's impossible to sum up any one idea with a thing. I like to say that my solo stuff is like a frozen explosion, you know, and then the Hrvatsky stuff is like teen angst manifest. And maybe that makes sense, or maybe it doesn't. I don't know. I'm really into just straight up improvisation, really. That's how I get all of my sounds. I mean, these days I work sort of in the past tense with music, where I have some really huge store of material, or an idea, or a process, and then I turn that into a finished piece of music. Sometimes with compositional records, like multiples, it's all about going to a place where there's instruments, or some technique, or a studio that I can use, and then just farming just lots and lots of material, and then taking that home and then assembling it, in a comfortable environment. But what I'm doing tonight, like live music, is a completely different beast, where it's, all about developing systems and things that I can travel around. It's the whole challenge of coming up with an idea that makes sense in front of people, but also involves as little gear as possible, so that I can go from town to town actually doing it. So it's twofold. I just think it's really interesting obviously when you're playing live every night, you're always in different places and spaces. I mean, no two rooms are alike, and I'm just a huge fan of someone like Alvin Lucier, who's, has written a lot of pieces that accentuate room tone, and almost the whole process of the piece involves reciprocally playing something in a room and emphasizing it, because basically if you play the fundamental frequency of any room back through the same room, you get this really huge standing wave sort of psychoacoustic experience. And I find that it's a really cheap, like computationally cheap way of getting really large masses of sound. I could just play a single guitar note, or a note through a distortion pedal, and then have it in my computer recording the same sound being played through the room, maybe playing it up an octave and down an octave, and then playing that back out through the room, and it just keeps going infinitely, so that you just get this huge pileup of a very simple sound, but it just becomes so massive and intense that the feedback of the room, of course, takes over. I like this idea of music being a whole, fully sensory experience. Even if I'm not doing video, just having it be almost just completely immersive. So I guess I'm trying to get more and more into that. I had 2 record contracts. I had one with Cranky for my own music, and then I had one with Planet View for Hrvatsky, and it was just, I thought it was a sort of a act of kindness on my part to sort of let people know that it would either be this beatless, texture-based music, repetitive, concerned with certain kinds of instruments, or something that was clearly sort of from the dance music canon, using those sounds, break beats, big, roving bass lines, but not necessarily dance music, just something that was clearly deconstructed and cut apart. And it's getting to the point now where the difference between the two is it's getting less and less every day. I mean, I can morph into a Hrvatsky set from a KFW set and vice versa. Sometimes I do. Sometimes it just happens naturally, and other times I just keep it sort of segregated. And there's I play concerts, and 2 kinds of people come. The black hoodie, digital hardcore, kids, the Hrvatsky fans, and the art students, and the KFW fans, and they get along now. At first, they didn't get along at all. They just stood on the opposite side of the gymnasium like a high school dance, girls versus boys, and stared at each other. But now, they're starting to intermingle a little more. Sun is a metal band who makes drones, and it's kind of like this middle ground there. And there's dance music that's crossed over to things like Mago, or Finesse, or something that's purely textural, but obviously comes from a dance music background. So it's pretty, it's a good time, I think, for music. There's a lot of healthy cross-pollination going on. I was invited to do a concert in Portugal, in Lisbon, in October, and I'd never been there. I'd never been to Portugal. And it was after I'd been on a really grueling tour of England and Ireland and Scotland, where I just was playing every night, and the shows were getting worse and worse and worse, and it was just really disheartening. I came home and I had this 2-week break where I didn't get out of bed, for 2 weeks, and then the Lisbon thing was like the guy that organized the gig was just a beautiful guy, Nelson, and he just was really like, you have to come do this. It's our festival. It's the first chance we've gotten to be able to fly people from elsewhere to Lisbon, So I agreed and went and did it, and I flew like on 4 separate flights to get there, and I have these sinus problems and I couldn't hear anything. I mean, I just showed up completely deaf, and he sat me down at a restaurant and got me some swordfish and just was really like, really glad you're here. And it was the first time I got some real like genuine enthusiasm, because the entire tour of England was just like, oh yeah, you're the DJ? Okay, set up over there, and then when you're done, you're gonna sleep in the corner over there, And it went from that to like this guy really like showing me around and really wanted me there. So I was just inspired, and I it's rare that a full set of this playthrough's material is entirely successful. There's always some mistake or some note track's wrong, and it sends this dissonant, note to the array. But that set was just magic. Everything was perfect. Everything about it works great. The feedback didn't get out of hand. The piece made sense musically. So, and I was just in a great mood. So I just, I recorded it and came home, and then, a month later I listened to it, and I was like, this is probably the best single long piece that I've done, and it didn't really matter whether it was recorded on stage or in the studio. So I just decided to release it. And of course Cranky were like, when's the next record? When's the next record? Come on, Stern Taskmasters, we're gonna have the next record. So no, they're not really like that. But they, they were really enthusiastic, and they just, they were like, great, 40-minute piece, 1 chord, let's do it, and I designed it, and that was it. It just, it came out 6 months after the concert, which is pretty damn amazing for me. I take 3 hours, three years to do records. 6 months for a record. That's like, a world speed record. I'm working on an album. Yeah, I'm working on a sort of a follow-up to Multiples. I think this is going to be the year of reissues. Like, I have all of these things that I did that either didn't really come out officially or were like in these tiny editions. So I think we're going to do like, Cranky's going to do a CD of those 2 LPs that I did, the Antithesis and Sugar Fliss Angle, as 1 CD with extra tracks. And we're also talking about doing the first EP that I did under my own name, which is this 2130 for acoustic guitar, with a version I did, maybe 2 years ago called 22 Minutes for electric guitar, and they just make sense together. They're very tonally similar, even though one is really noisy, one is really minimal, but I think they make sense as a CD. So it's already, there's 2 discs worth of stuff there that's waiting to come out. So, and then on top of that, yeah, I am working on a new KFW record that's mostly very sort of musique concrète sounding and very like getting into all of that ZAR, Cologne, 1959 kind of Josef Anton Riedel, Stockhausen, Herbert Brunn kind of sounds. I just got really enamored with that whole tone set of everything being synthesis. Absolutely no field recordings, absolutely no instruments, just everything being electronic, really synthesized. And a lot of this, of course, banks on the fact that I managed to buy a synthesizer that I like, this Doepfer modular that is like my baby. I have it with me here tonight, and that's sort of exploring just purely analog sound has become really, because I grew up using computers, everything. I grew up with a Commodore VIC-20 and then a Atari, and then, always doing all of my music always on computers. Went to school for computer music. So getting something like an analog synthesizer at home with a patch bay and physically, electricity there is like a totally alien way of working, and it's so amazing. It's such a really direct way of making music. So that's kind of what's inspiring me at the moment, and that's how those records always start, with one single inspiration that turns into an entire, 60-minute